Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online news video. Kind of a news video. It's more or less the developer deep dive. Let's talk about class identity in ESO. And I already read it, and I have to say that everything the devs say here speaks to me as a player, because I'm one of those people that doesn't like to that really just wants to play the game the way it was intended, which is play how you want and all that. But we'll get to that. We're going to read through this. Starting with the first part here, it says, class identity has long been an important topic, especially in recent months, on the ESO forums and social channels and on the dev team. This loaded term can mean different things to different people, and we can agree it's an important element to creating a satisfying combat experience in an effort to improve how we communicate, our vision of combat in ESO going forward. We thought this would be a good topic to dive into and share our perspective. When our team uses the term class identity, we're referring to what makes the experience playing the class feel unique from other classes, regardless of what role the character may be fulfilling. We break down that experience into two primary components: power fantasy and play patterns. Now, they go over both of these details quite extensively, and we're going to start with the power fantasy thing first, of course, because this really does dive into how they perceive some of the aspects of this idea of what they feel class identity means. So, power fantasy refers to the fictional justification of your character's power and how it's expressed through the look and feel of abilities. Necromancers draw their strength from death magic as they manipulate souls, flesh, and bone. Templars call upon the power of light and the burning sun. Every class should have a clearly defined source of power. A class abilities should reinforce that fantasy through their descriptions, animations, visual effects, and audio. When you see a player using class abilities, you should have little doubt which class they are playing, and it should look awesome. And it says here, Dragon Knight brings flames and fury. So this power fantasy, however, should not dictate or constrain your character's role in battle. One of our mantras for ESO is play the way you want. And they have been very adamant to stick to this mantra for so long that I think a lot of players still don't see that within the game's design, because they're so stuck on the Trinity system of tank, healer, damage dealer, and they see the classes built as such. And I will admit some classes do have that, but they explain some of that here in a second. So, and in this case, it means any class can fulfill any role: tank, DPS, support / healer, to better achieve this ideal while you also maintaining their unique fantasy flavor of each class. All class kits need to include the basic tools required to fulfill each role. To be clear, our goal is for every class to be viable, okay? Viable at a role. Not necessarily optimal in any role without heavily relying on non-class skill lines. Currently, a number of class kits don't succeed in the goal, particularly when it comes to stamina choices and healer builds. And those class cases are prime candidates to receive additional attention and more significant changes in future updates. Now, I will talk more about this, what they said here, the healers and stamina choices, because really there's, in my opinion, there's only two classes that lack here, and that's the Sork and the Nightblade for healer. But the Nightblade does play healer really well. It just doesn't play healer, and Dragon Knight too. But Dragon Knights and Nightblades can both be very successful healers, even in the end game. It's just that people want the other classes because they have better skill setups for it. Like Sorks have amazing heal setup. DKs, or not DKs, Templars have an amazing heal setup. Wardens have an amazing heal setup. So, Necromancers even have an amazing heal setup. So, but it says the second component of class identity focuses on play patterns, which are the specific mechanics and behaviors you have to learn, engage with, and master to achieve objectives in battle. While all healers might have an objective of prevent ally health from reaching 0, you can achieve this through several effective behaviors or effect behaviors: direct heals, heal over time, damage shields, and damage reduction, to name a few. Each of these effect behaviors exhibit benefits and limitations that, when combined with a target triggering method, make them more or less effective in various contexts. Direct heals, for example, can quickly replenish an ally who is low in health, but you have to wait until an ally has taken damage to use it, and risk a loss of constant efficiency if you overheal. You can apply this same method throughout of thought to damage and tanking abilities. So, and it goes on to say the triggering method itself is the other major factor of play patterns, since it defines the inputs and conditions you must satisfy to trigger the effect behavior. Most abilities include conditions related to range, targeting, resource type, and resource cost. Such abilities such as a Nightblade's Grim Focus and a Sorcerer's Crystal Fragments include additional custom requirements. Custom requirements can be very effective for creating a unique feel for an ability, but can also easily wander into territory where they feel too gimmicky, unnecessarily complex compared to abilities with similar effect behaviors, or misaligned with the power fantasy of the character. Successful ability design demands a healthy relationship between the triggering method and the effect behavior. The new design for bound armaments in Update 24 represents one of our recent attempts to achieve this within the Sorcerer's Kit for stamina builds. So if you guys don't know, Update 24 is changing bound armaments, not bound Aegis. Bound armaments, the stamina morph of that ability. And basically now it shows 2 crossed daggers instead of the armor thing. And when you activate it, it still gives you the 8% max stamina, the 11% damage, but now when you activate it, it creates a floating dagger that after so many successful light attacks, it'll create more daggers, and then on a activation of that same ability, like reactivating it, it will send all these daggers out hitting your target, which is really cool, and it's a really interesting addition to the Sorcerer's Kit that makes it unique, makes it play differently than other classes, which I really like. That combination of, and then we're going to continue on now, that combination of triggering method and effect behavior establishes the mechanical feel of an ability. And when you string together several abilities in conjunction with core mechanics, movement, attack, block, etc., a play pattern emerges. These play patterns are critical to reinforcing class identity by differentiating the experience along 3 axes. Playing the same role with different classes, playing different roles with the same classes, and engaging in PvE versus PvP activities. To temper expectations, it's highly unlikely we'll ever reach a point where every class in every role feels equally unique in both PvE and PvP. But it is an ideal we can continue to strive toward as we revisit class kits and new skill lines. And skill lines. Alright, now you may be asking yourself how non-class skill lines fit into the theoretical world of strong class identities. After all, if class abilities are the embodiment of power fantasy and class kits include all the basic tools required to fulfill a role, why would you bother with using abilities outside those kits? The team is still exploring the problem space, but our current thinking is that non-class lines should fulfill two primary purposes. First, they should allow you to fill gaps in your build when your class kit doesn't provide the exact behaviors you need or are comfortable with. Second, they should open up the possibility space of your character's build, both in terms of power fantasy and play patterns, by mixing and matching from the large pools of available abilities. I am going to talk more about all this stuff that they say here at the end. So let's just get finished with the reading of this stuff, and then I'll go over and talk a lot more about my feelings about this, and honestly why this is such a good thing that they're bringing this up now, because it does play into a lot of aspects of things that people don't quite understand. So what we don't want is to create scenarios where, to be effective, you feel obligated to fill a majority of your hotbar slots with non-class abilities. Forfeiting your class identity should be an option, but not a requirement to engage in PvE or PvP content. We acknowledge this is not the current reality for many classes and builds, and it's one of the major areas for improvement we intend to tackle. The team's immediate focus on this front is to look at some of the major or more significant outlier cases where classes are lacking unique play patterns and rely on abilities outside their kit. The aforementioned bound armaments change, as well as the update to the Warden's growing swarm morph, are a couple of recent examples of this effort. We consider these changes to be stopgap measures, while the team evaluates more holistic improvements for each class in the future. We're not ready to share the details of those long-term efforts, but the team is excited to push toward a future where class identities are unique, coherent, and satisfying for all players in all roles. Hopefully we shed a light on how we use the term class identity internally. In summary, we define success as delivering class kits that combine cohesive, satisfying power fantasy with unique, effective play patterns. The end result should be the ability to fill any role with any class while retaining the look and feel of that class. You can expect future updates to include changes with the goal in mind. As always, your feedback is welcome, and we appreciate your continued support. So, excuse me for the hairball. So going over pretty much everything that they talked about here, from power fantasy to play patterns to dropping in other class or other non-class abilities to fill the gap in your character, it's really interesting when you look at it and you discuss it with other people, especially things like Nightblade healing, for example. Nightblade healers are by far the best dot healers in the game, and that's because a lot of their heals are effectively HOTS, their heal over times. So when you take into account the fact that the Nightblade has the most effective heal over time abilities compared to any other class, that makes him unique and dynamic to other classes. But they don't have a burst heal, not a really good one. So that's where things like dropping in the skill Combat Prayer for your Nightblade comes into effect, because now you've got a burst heal that you can use more effectively, and it hits multiple targets, so it's not just a one-time use. And then there's other things too, when they talk about like trying to make classes more effective in role. Like, I will admit Sort could use a couple other stam abilities. I think Crystal Frags is a great skill that they could do that with. They could make one Crystal Frags the magic base one where it casts, and then you get that thing where you, for so many casts, whatever, you get that quick cast on it, and it does massive damage. Keep that for the magic aside, but I think for a stamina morph with that, what would be really cool is if they introduced an instant cast, less damage, with an AoE explosion. So like, you're up close, you cast it, you hit the target. If there's a lot of ads around, it does damage in an AoE around it, so that the crystal frag explodes and hits multiple targets, not just the one you hit. So it would be a much more, in my opinion, interesting play style for the stamina player, because now they have an ability that when enemies get up close, they can throw it out and it does damage. Not only could they do that, but they could also make it to where it does bleed damage. So it'll do damage up front and then damage over time to all the enemies hit. So this makes it an AoE bleed, which would be really good. That would give something unique to the sorcerer that no other class really has. So I would find that interesting. The other ones that they talk about is like the Warden, giving them the growing swarm that is now a stamina morph. That is an excellent idea of a way to improve upon a class skill and give the Warden something just as effective as the other one, but this one now is an AoE bleed. So it's kind of like you got this really cool thing on them, and that's where they're talking about, like, they want classes' abilities not to feel similar to other classes. They want them to feel different and unique, but at the same time being able to fulfill any role. And that's where, again, there's always going to be a meta, guys. So there's always going to be those people who say the DK is the best tank mathematically, when in reality any class can tank effectively, and they can do that now. It's just that their play styles are different. Their play patterns are a lot different. Take a Templar versus a DK, for example. They might work similar in how they play, like in their skill uses. Like, you're going to use your resistance buff, you're going to use these skills, and these skills, but because you're a Templar, you have all these other abilities that the DK doesn't. And the DK has things the Templar doesn't. So they still have tools in their toolkit that allow them to be flexible and to play into those roles. And it's the same thing with a Nightblade. A Nightblade plays a tank much differently than a Sorc or a DK or any other class. And that's the thing that they need to keep focusing on, is keeping the game's design structured this way to where you have a lot more flexibility and freedom in how you play. It's one of the main reasons why I still play this game to this date, is the fact that there's so many different options in class playstyle. Like, I had two Nightblades. Originally I had a Stamina Nightblade and a Magic Nightblade. Now I have a Stamina Nightblade and a Support Nightblade. So I have this Stamina DPS Nightblade, and I have a Support Hybrid Nightblade. So that way they can play with both melee and magic, and they can play both effective damage dealer and healer if necessary. So it's not that the build itself is a fantastic healer, but it works out. So it's really interesting that the way they did list them out here when they were talking about the different roles. And they literally said tank, DPS, support / healer. Because a support character or a healer, that's a support character. Anyone who plays in a group that offers a type of support can be a healer. They can be, and then they talk about the changes, like the difference between tanks and healing and roles and all that kind of stuff. But when they're talking about this difference in, like, support and healer, there isn't much of a difference. It's just a support role utilizes more things like damage shields. They use a lot more abilities to support and aid the group, where a healer uses heals and support to aid their group. A support character is kind of the opposite of a healer. They use very strong support skills with heals secondary, where healers bring good healing with support secondary. So it's like they still bring the same things, and it's really cool that they kind of go into that here and they explain that. And then on top of that, they explain all this other stuff about the two types of play. So you have the power fantasy, and then you have the play patterns. Power fantasy being that every class should feel unique and different in how it plays, no matter the role, but it should still be efficient and effective. Well, it should at least be viable to play any role. It doesn't mean that it's going to be perfectly optimal. So, I think that's why they incorporated that in any role without heavily relying on non-class skill lines. And that's kind of what it is. If you want to play effectively as some classes, as some roles, you do have to use skill lines outside your class to be more effective at it. But you can do it. It's kind of like, what's the difference between healing and light armor and healing and heavy armor? Those are two different armor types. It doesn't change how you heal, right? But it does. It changes how your resources work. It changes how your survivability works. It changes a lot of things. And it also changes the fact that when you do heal in heavy armor, using a resto staff might not be the wisest choice. And I'm not saying that to be negative. I'm saying that because when you heal in heavy armor, it's better to play support healer than full healer. When you play in light armor, it's better to go healer with support secondary. And it's just like when you play a medium armor healer, or support character, you play support with healing secondary. So it's like medium and heavy armor, you can be an effective healer in heavy armor and effective healer in light armor, but medium armor, it's better to go support healer, because unless you're playing warden. So, but to make a long story short here, I agree with everything they say here on how they perceive class identity, because to me, class identity isn't like a lot of people make it out. Like, you hear a lot of people say, oh, well, Dragon Knight's just a tank, that's what they're best at, da-da-da. No. Dragon Knight has its place. It is the dot master of all classes. Like, no class can beat it in dots, because they have the most dots. And it needs to stay that way, because that's what makes that class unique and different. I will admit right now, along with a lot of other people, their dots aren't the greatest. And they're not perfect, but it doesn't mean that they're not, something that can be worked with or adjusted later on. The same thing goes for many other things in the game when it comes to classes. Like, there's a lot of things they definitely still need to adjust in this update. What, I don't know, because I don't work for the company and I don't know what their end goal here is. I can only go by my own experiences, and I will say that some of the dots that they nerf definitely need to be brought back up. Some of them being DK dots, some of them being like weapon dots, some being just the dots in all overall. I think the 1.25 drop, or drop to 1.25 in DPS, was a little much. I have to agree with a lot of people. I think a 1.5 or a 1.75 would be better. And I say that the 1.75 with a grain of salt, because that I still think would put them too overpowered, where 1.5 I think would put them more in line with a more balanced approach, to where their damage over time does 1.5% more damage than the direct damage that you would do with the direct damage ability. This way, damage over time wouldn't be 25% better, it would be a little bit better in the long term, where burst damage would still be more effective in the short term. So you would still want to have that rotation where you apply your dots, then you do your bursts, or your spammables. And that's kind of the direction that the game is going right now, and I honestly think that's the way the game needs to continue to go. When I hear people say that the game doesn't need, it needs a dot meta on top of a regular meta, dots are good to use, don't get me wrong. But I also think that there has to be a place for the people who want to play more burst builds, and those who want to play more dot builds. And what I mean by burst builds, I mean builds that go in, hit hard really fast with a lot of abilities, and then drop back some to recharge and do it again. Kind of like a dot build will do theirs. They'll apply all their dots, they'll go in and do their bursts and stuff, and then it gives them time to dodge, roll, block, and stuff like that. Burst builds are a little different, and it's something that this game, I honestly think it lacks, is that kind of playstyle, that more dynamic playstyle than just one factor. So, because we've been playing the same meta for so long, that it definitely we need more than one option. And when it comes to the end game, we definitely need more than one option. Because I don't like to say things like this, but I will say it this time. And don't take this negatively, guys, because it's not meant to be this, like, end-all, be-all thing. But I do agree with the devs. When you have a game like ESO that offers so many different ways to play, so many different skills, so many different gear sets to choose from, so many ways that you can put together a build, every build that's put together has to be viable in the game, regardless of how bad that build might be. Has to be viable in some way. And I'm not talking about a build that's made for Magicka with all stamina enchants. I'm talking about a build, you know, like the proper, like, building structure of the game. Like, if you make a stamina character, make them a stamina character. You make a Magicka character, make a Magicka character. You make a hybrid, make them a hybrid that works. Don't make them a build that, or don't make a build that's something really bad, like a purely stamina-based character using nothing but magic abilities. That would be really stupid. And yes, it would be really stupid, because it just would not be viable. You'd be running out of resources faster than you could actually use any of your abilities, so it wouldn't be pertinent. But, I mean, the devs say that those are possible, and those are things people do, and I don't agree with it. I think that there has to be some kind of structure there, and there is, and I think the devs have a structure built into the game that allows for a lot of diversity, a lot of flexibility in builds, and I think what they've always been trying to say, especially when they say play how you want, is not play to the restrictions of, as they stated in their live streams, the trendsetters, which I happen to be at fault for at one time, along with many other people. But that's setting a trend, and that's basically, like they said, creating, you know, the meta players telling you that you have to use these abilities or you're dumb. This is where the devs need to look at their own game. They need to look at what they're doing with it, and they need to adjust the game so it does allow that flexibility and that freedom. And there's a lot of things they could do, like incorporating more into crafting, like another tier that we can craft into called perfected gear. This way we can gain extra stats on gear to make it similar to that which drops in a dungeon or trial. Like maybe even the possibility of enhancing gear to have that 5% increase to damaging dungeon and trial mobs as a thing that you can put into a piece of gear to make it perfected. Or something along those lines. There's a lot of things they could do. I mean, a lot of people have even brought this up where they need to go and look at, now that they've got these perfected sets in the newer trials, and the newer, like Black Rose Prism and Asylum Sanctorum, they've got the perfected weapon sets. They need to do that with the other sets as well that came out previously. And that is to put those sets in balance with the new sets. Otherwise, it makes a lot of other sets look really obsolete and useless. And this is another reason why you see a lot of people sticking to these really high-end sets that drop in these trials as their primary sets, like Reliquin and Sororia and all that when it comes to the meta. Because they have things in there built into them that allow them to gain that greater effectiveness of that higher damage output, that higher survivability, all that stuff that you can't get in other sets for dungeons and trials. So, but that's just, you know, a lot of that's just my opinion, but again, everything I'm saying in this video, besides what I read from the devs themselves, is my opinion. And I do think that the devs are right in their idea of one, not trying to alleviate the game from having a meta, but expanding the game to allow more options within the meta. So that way we're not restricted to one build fits all kind of thing, but we have multiple builds with multiple group structures and multiple play styles for every role in every class. This way it creates a dynamic that allows for more flexibility in group play. And you're not restricted to just one class fits this role, and every class that plays DPS all has to wear the same stuff. What I'm saying is create more diversity, create more flexibility, and that's what the devs are saying, is what they want the game to be. They want it to be flexible, they want it to be diverse, and that's why they keep doing all these changes. That a lot of it, and I have said this in the past, a lot of it directly does affect the meta, because they're nerfing the effectiveness of the meta to keep the meta to a standard. And then you have all these people saying, well, yeah, but this just hurts everybody in the game. It does, but it doesn't. Because remember, those people that you guys talk about that are only pulling like 25, 30k DPS, and they're not pulling 90k and getting, or 100k and getting a 20k difference in their DPS, are only getting like a 3 to 5k difference. That 3 to 5k difference can be made up with proper builds and things like that, and not just proper builds, but structure and an idea of like, hey, this sets for this part of you and this sets for this part of you, these combinations work really well, try this or this or this. And this is where that idea of, hey, we have so many content creators in this game now that create builds, let's all have our own structure of build design that keeps us separated. So this way we're not just copying and pasting what each other's doing. So we have flexibility and options available to the community. Whether it's for the average player, the casual player, the hardcore, the in-gamer, whatever you want to call it, flexibility is important to everyone. And having freedom to play how you want is what their goal, their overall goal is, while still maintaining this structure and design to the game. So, but let's leave it at that, and yeah. So that's pretty much it for the video, guys. To the devs, awesome write-up. I enjoyed reading it. Great information in there. You guys can check the link in the description below. Find that there. Or you can also just go to the website. It's right on the front page. Other than that, you guys know what's coming next. If you like this video, hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day. And this guy might see you in game. Bye.